Hello, 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 and welcome back to
A Little Birdie Told You.
I'm your host, Kristen Knight.
And I'm your host, Kelli Knight.
And today, the topic of discussion is going to be setting boundaries and implementing boundaries. So what are boundaries? To me, boundaries is the behavior that you accept from other people.
Mm-hmm.
I think it, especially in relationships.
Like the way you act in like relationships, and that's like leading towards like friendships and like romantic relationships. But like you also should have boundaries with yourself, knowing like
Exactly.
your goals and like your matters of what's going on in your life matter before other people sometimes.
And I think that's the foundation for setting boundaries is you need to know what you value and what you believe in your morals as a person. Because if you don't, and those are not strong enough, when you're in relationships, you're not going to know how to stand up for yourself and say, this is my opinion.
Because some people in relationships just kind of let people like push them around, even in friendships though too. But like you shouldn't let that happen. Like you should have boundaries for yourself.
And I think the problem is I think people get attached to people and they're afraid, if
Like I'm gonna lose that person, and like if I don't do this, then they're gonna like break up with me, or they're not gonna be friends with me anymore. They're gonna leave my life. Like that doesn't matter. Like it really doesn't.
Well, your boundaries are something where you accept from yourself and you're like, this is something that I don't
Like if you
tolerate.
don't feel comfortable doing something, you don't have to do it. Like you have your own limits of what you want to do and what you don't want to do, and you don't have to do them.
And you know when someone's crossing your boundary because you feel uncomfortable. Like I've had that feeling where somebody says something or does something and I'm like, ugh. Like I'm starting to feel like this isn't my comfort zone. This is not me. Like you're entering a zone that I don't allow other people to enter. And you have two choices there. You can either communicate to that person, hey, this is not something that's going to work for me, or you just allow that person to walk all over you and allow them to cross that boundary. And when you do that, they're just going to continuously cross over that boundary and people are going to continuously walk all over you. So if you don't communicate, and like I always say, communication is key. And it's so true because in all aspects of your life, if you do not communicate what you want or communicate your desires or communicate what you're going to accept, you're not going to get that point across, and you need to effectively communicate. So if somebody does something to you and you're sitting there and you have your boundaries, right? Maybe one of your boundaries is I don't tolerate people mistreating me. If you're going to treat me badly, then I don't want anything to do with you. And some people look at that and they're like, okay, well, this is a relationship that I value and I don't want to lose this person. So if they treat me badly, I'm not going to say anything because I'm afraid that if I say something to them, they're going to be like, I don't want to talk to you anymore. Get away from me. They want to get away from you. Let them get away from you. Yeah, let them go. Because the way you have to look at it is somebody who values you and respects you, they're going to accept your boundaries. They're going to say, that's fine. I respect that. Thank you for informing me of that, if that makes sense. Like if someone tells me, if I'm talking to somebody or if we're friends with somebody or just any relationship, any connection in general, like if that pertains to anything in your life, even just in school, like if you're talking to somebody and someone says something to you and you're like, I accept that. I understand. That's fine. Like if you say something that offends them or something, they say that's crossing my boundary. I don't talk about that. I don't do that. And you're going to accept that because you value that person's opinion. And you need boundaries because if you don't set boundaries, no one's going to respect you. They're just going to walk all over you. So it's not only allowing you to respect yourself, like you were saying, you need boundaries with yourself. It's allowing other people to respect you as a person.
What are some boundaries you think you should have?
I think the first boundaries that should be set in place are definitely the boundaries with yourself. I think it's kind of like a form of discipline. Like when you're supposed to do certain things. Like, for example, a lot of people probably are like, oh, I'm just going to spend some time on my phone for a few minutes. I'm just going to play video games for a few minutes. I'm just going to hang out with my friends for a few minutes and talk to them. And then they realize I actually should be doing something else that's important for my well-being, important for myself. Yet I'm taking time and I'm allowing these people to cross my boundaries, or I'm allowing myself to fall out of this, mindset of, I should be doing this when actually I'm going to go do this. And that's kind of not respecting the boundaries you have with yourself. So I think that we do need to set boundaries with ourselves initially to be able to set boundaries with other people.
It's like that saying, like work before play.
Yeah, it ties into that. It correlates to that. But I think that you need to have boundaries with yourself to understand how to have boundaries with other people. Because if you need to build up yourself strong enough to say, I can withstand all of this. So I think what you need to do to set boundaries, if you're in a circumstance and you're like, I don't really have any boundaries. I just kind of let people treat me how they want. Don't let people treat you how they want. You get to choose how you get to be treated. I truly believe that. I think if you don't set boundaries, you're afraid to say no when people ask you a question, because if someone asks you something and you feel obligated to say yes, you're not setting boundaries. If you feel uncomfortable and you want to say no, just say no. And if they don't respect that, then just let them go.
Obviously, if somebody doesn't respect your boundaries and they're not like accepting the things that you're okay with doing, then obviously they're not your real friend or like somebody that's
Exactly.
real in your life.
That's why I said they don't
Because
value
if
you.
somebody's real and like a real person in general, they're going to accept the things that you're not okay with doing.
Yeah, they're going
And
to
they're going to be like,
respect you.
that's fine. Don't worry about it.
But implementing boundaries allows people to respect you. Because if people understand, hey, they have a boundary, they have these
And
boundaries
they know that
they
you
set,
like, you know your worth.
yeah, you know your worth. It's showing that you know your worth because you should know your worth as a person. So I think if you're having trouble with setting boundaries, take a step back and understand who you are and say, I'm enough, I'm worthy, I value myself, and begin to value yourself and say, my boundaries are important. And other people might look at you and say, oh, that's kind of weird that they don't tolerate that or they don't accept that. Who cares? It's not about them. It's about you. You need to feel comfortable in yourself and feel comfortable in setting boundaries. Because if you're not comfortable with something, then you shouldn't have to do it. Like if you're in a relationship with somebody and they're like, oh, I want to do this. Like you get when you're in a relationship and maybe somebody wants to get intimate very quickly and you're not comfortable with that. You're like, no, I'm not. But you feel obligated to do
Just
whatever.
say something.
Just say something. But some people, this is your problem. If you feel obligated to say yes and you're like, I'm going to say yes because like, I don't want to lose this person. I'm afraid if I say no, they're just going to like leave me and they're going to walk away and they're going to want nothing to do with me. Well, if they really care about you, saying no is not going to hurt them. They're going to understand because they're going to respect your comfort. If they value you, they're going to want to make you feel as comfortable as possible. So if you say no, they're not going to look at you and say, oh, well, then they're going to start, threatening you and just saying, oh, well, if you don't do this, then I'm not going to do this. No, they're just going to say, yeah, that's fine. I accept that. I respect that. And if they don't, someone else will. Someone who actually cares about you is going to respect your boundaries and respect what you have to say. But I think that people are afraid to say no because they don't want to lose something. And I think that's one of the firm sets of a boundary is saying no, but make sure you say it assertive. Like, don't say no. Say no.
Like, say it's serious.
Yeah, be assertive. And you need to be assertive because if you're trying to implement boundaries and you're trying to change your habits and say, I'm going to put in boundaries, you're going to say no. Like, I've been in situations where I've had to say no. And you're scared because I'm somebody who people pleases. I used to people please, I think that has something to do with, that's like a lack of setting boundaries is you people please. And you want everyone to feel content. You want everyone around you to feel happy because you're like, if I don't, then I'm afraid I'm going to lose everyone or no one's going to want anything to do with me. Take time alone. Understand what it's like to be alone. And then you're going to have plenty of boundaries. But make sure they're healthy. Because I think if you set boundaries where you completely isolate yourself, it's very unhealthy for yourself and your well-being. I think you have to have boundaries where I'm staying away from toxicity, I'm staying away from unhealthy habits, unhealthy people, and unhealthy connections. But I'm still allowing people into my life, just I'm refraining from unhealthy situations. And I think that's how you'll start to learn to set boundaries. But I think that if you constantly people please, those boundaries, people are not going to respect you because they don't. They just look at you and like, oh, that's a people pleaser. That's somebody who just is going to do whatever I say to make me feel content. So I'm satisfied.
Another thing is, like, if somebody, like, you already tell them, like, oh, I don't want to do that, and they keep bringing it up and asking you, they're obviously not a real person.
Yeah, and that's somebody
because if somebody, like, they'll remember in the back of their mind, oh, like, they do not feel comfortable doing that. I'm not going to ask them again to do that. Like, if they keep asking you, obviously they don't really care much about your opinion.
And I think another thing is if you tell someone no and then they don't respect that, that's an unhealthy relationship. If they keep continuously bringing
like even the same thing with like maybe you're friends with somebody and they like you, but like you don't like them back and you don't want to like do it, like you don't want to date them or whatever, but like they keep asking you to date them and like they can't like get the understanding of like, no, I don't want to be more than friends. Like, you need to set a boundary there and figure out if you still want to be friends with them or not,
Yeah, and you need to communicate the boundary. That's the same thing if you were to break up with somebody or get in a relationship with somebody, you're like, these are my boundaries. This is something that I don't accept in a relationship, and they're not willing to accept that.
Like, don't let somebody push you around. Like, you should know your worth, and, like, you should say something if you're uncomfortable.
Yeah, and stand up and say, have your opinion. Don't be afraid to have an opinion.
Like, you shouldn't care, like, say what you want, and you shouldn't care of what's going to come out of it.
Well, because I think a lot of people are afraid to state their opinion. Like I said, they're afraid to lose people. People don't want to be alone. They don't want to lose people. They don't want people to walk out of their lives, especially if they really care about somebody.
And I think that's a lot of the reason why people say, like, yes all the time to things that they're not comfortable with. It's because they're scared of losing people. And I get that. But honestly, at the end of the day, that person might not be a real person in your life if you're, like, over here, like, saying something that you're not comfortable with and they keep asking you.
Exactly. Like, you could be wasting your time and saying yes. Like, someone's like, oh, let's go hang out. And you're like, you have other ththings that you're obligated to do. You have other requirements to do for the day, things that you need to accomplish. And you're like, yeah, because you don't want to lose that person, or you're like, you just want to be around that person. And then a week later, that person's not even in your life anymore. So take the time and realize
Like the
what's
things
important
and the
to
goals
you.
in your life are more important than the people around you.
Yeah. Always remember the relationship that needs to come first is the relationship with yourself, not the relationship with other people. Yes, relationships and connections with other people are important to some degree, but the relationship that always needs to come first is yourself, because if
Like
you don't
need to
have
love
that
yourself
relationship,
before loving other people.
and if you don't set those boundaries with yourself, then those relationships with other people are not going to work out. They're not going to be, you're going to be codependent. And that's when you're not setting boundaries, is when you're codependent on other people and you're not able to be independent and you're not having these boundaries with yourself, and you're just like, oh, I'm just going to attach myself to this person. I don't want to say no. I'm going to say yes all the time. Don't do that. And then that person knows, oh yeah, they just say yes to everything. And they take advantage of that. Say no when it's necessary. If you don't want to do something,
And like
say
another
no.
thing, saying no also shows like you know your worth, and that's like a really big thing to a person, you know?
Exactly.
Of being like, oh, they know their worth. Like that's a good thing.
They respect themselves, and then they're going to respect you. The level of respect and how they perceive you is going to increase in respect, because they're going to look at you and like, they respect themselves. I respect that. You know, when you look at somebody and you can tell they respect themselves and they're not afraid to say no, they're not afraid to say their opinions, you do respect them, because at least they're not willing to be walked all over. Don't let people walk all over you. And I get it. It's scary if you're afraid to say no, because you're like, I don't want if you say no that somebody might back off, or they might, take a step away from you. But at the same time, do you really want someone in your life that's not going to respect you in the future? Think about the future too, of friendships, and later down the road, if something comes across and you do truly need to say no and that person doesn't respect that.
What should you do if like somebody's really controlling?
I think that you should probably take a step away from them. I would definitely communicate that boundary. I think that you have to do certain things for your well-being, and I think that if you tell somebody no, say somebody texts you, right? Say somebody texts you in an hour where you're studying or you're doing something that's really important for yourself, and you're like, imagine you're working or something, and you're like, don't text me, please. I can't have any distractions right now. And that person texts you. You communicate to that person, hey, we can't talk right now because I'm busy. That person continuously calls you. Start taking actions. Further yourself from that person. Turn off your phone. Do things that are going to avoid that person or avoid that situation, so you can set boundaries for yourself. Don't say, oh yeah, just this one time. Because that one time is going to turn into multiple times. It's just going to keep reoccurring. That's like what I said, is if you let somebody break a boundary once, they're just going to keep coming through, and they're just going to step beyond that boundary over and over and over again. It's going to be a continuous cycle, because they're going to look at you and they're just going to expect that out of you. When you say no, then they're going to understand this person takes their boundaries seriously. This person seriously respects themselves, and they have a lot of self-worth, and they don't tolerate that. So don't do that to them. You know what I mean? So you really got to take that in consideration. And if you don't want people to look at you and say, oh yeah, they're just a pushover. If I ask them something, they're going to say, yeah, anyhow. If I ask them, like if someone's trying to vent to you on their feelings, if somebody comes up to you and they're like one of your friends, and they just think that they can tell you all their problems, and you're like, you don't want to deal with that. Maybe you have a lot going on in your life and you're already stressed out enough, and you're like, I can't deal with all these problems right now. I can't have all this on my shoulders. This weight is too heavy. And you look at them, communicate to them, hey, I understand there's a lot going on in your life right now, Kelly.
There's a lot going on in my life though.
But I am going to tell you right now that I cannot mentally deal with all of this. And I'm going to respectfully tell you that I'm going to decline your offer of telling me all your problems. I don't mean to say it like that, but I mean, tell them and communicate to them so they understand that you can't deal with all that.
It is hard when you have like that one friend that like always wants you to like listen to their problems.
Exactly.
When it comes to you having your problems, they're like, oh, I'm busy, I can't talk.
Exactly. And then it's like when you're that people pleaser, or you're that person that is like that friend that gives good advice, they come to you and they're like, I'm going to tell you all my problems. And you're like, and you feel obligated because they're your friend. Yes, they're your friend. And of course you care for them. I'm not saying to be a true friend, you should be there for your friend.
Make sure you're both like putting them out of energy.
Yeah, and you're setting boundaries. Like if they're coming to you every day about a problem, and you're like, I don't accept this. I didn't sign up. I didn't sign up to be a problem solver for you. And they're telling you their problems every day. You have the right as a person and for your well-being to say, I understand you're going through a lot and I want to help you, but I also I can't deal with all of this right now, and I can't talk you through all of your problems. You know what I'm saying? Now I'm saying obviously you should be there for your friends, but like imagine if a friend's coming to you every day telling you all their problems, or just in any situation where somebody thinks you're obligated to deal with all of this. So they're like, oh, can you do this for me? Can you do that for me? You have the right to say no. You have the right to stand up for yourself and say, I'm not doing that.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm not saying that, like, it's okay, obviously, sometimes to do that. But if somebody's repeatedly doing that, or you're just not comfortable doing certain things, just say no. And if that person thinks, that's why I said if you don't set boundaries, then that person is going to automatically assume you're always going to do things. Like, I've been in the habit where I constantly say yes, and people automatically assume I'm going to do something, and then I'm officially like, nope, that's it. You crossed the boundary. We're done here. You already knocked off too many boxes. We're done. I'm stopping this now. And I say no, and they're like, whoa, that was a shock, because they thought I was going to say yes, and I said no. So sometimes you got to shock people a little bit and say no. And I'm not meaning to do this like in a very like rude way where you just randomly say no, but if you feel like your well-being and your peace is being disrupted, and that's where I kind of draw the line, where I feel like if I feel like I'm becoming a little bit anxious, or I feel like I'm getting uncomfortable, I'm like, nope, that's it. No, I'm done. I'm taking time to go. Even if you need time alone, imagine you're like, you know how like I'm somebody who needs time alone. So if people don't respect that,
like you need your space.
Yeah, sometimes. I need my space. And if people don't respect that, I'm like, okay, well, then that's fine with me. It's not about you. It's about me in this case. I need some time alone. I'm going to go, regroup and be by myself for a little bit and do my own thing. And people don't respect that. That's me setting my boundaries right there. That's me saying no. That's me saying, I don't want to go do this. I don't want to go do that. I want to be alone. Do you know what I mean? Do you have any boundaries that you specifically set, or any boundaries that you think that you set for yourself?
I would say the boundaries that I have is like, if I'm doing something like homework or there's stuff like that becomes like more like, how would I say this? Like more like my stuff that I need to get done before other people. Like I always put my phone in like do not disturb, or like any type of focus. Like I always like keep my phone in do not disturb so I can focus on the things that I need to get done. Because, like, people will try to bother you. And it's like, okay, well, like, I'm busy. Like, I got other things to do real quick.
Do not disturb.
Yeah. But, like, also, like, I feel like I said, you have to love yourself before you love others. So if you feel like all of a sudden, like, you just feel down and you're not yourself, like, take time to focus on yourself before other people.
Another thing is if you're feeling emotionally or physically drained, being around people, that's a sign right there that your boundaries are being crossed, and you need to take a step back and you need to put energy into yourself. Because I think if you put enough energy into yourself, you're going to understand how to implement these boundaries, and you're going to understand, hey, I need to focus on me a little bit. I need to take some time away. And if people don't respect that, just allow those people to go. Because there's going to be people that truly value you and truly understand your boundaries, and you're going to accept other people's boundaries. And that's another aspect of implementing boundaries, is accepting other people when they say no, and accepting other people when they have boundaries set.